All right, let's build our RoboFriends app. I think to get started, we want to think about components again and what kind of components we want to build. Looking at this website, the smallest component that we probably want to start working on is perhaps the card component. This card over here. If we can build one of these, then according to what I've said before, we can just copy all these components and add them to the page. So let's start off with this, the card component. All right. Now, we won't be using the hello component anymore. And if you remember, it looked like this. I know it's sad, but we're going to delete it. We're going to delete the hello CSS, start off clean. So I'm going to delete, okay. And we'll also delete hello.css. I know all our hard work just completely gone. You know what? We're going to start deleting things that we don't need in this project. For example, the app.js that we had initially, well, we can delete that. We can also delete app.css, app.test, and the logo. All right, so everything's looking very small now. We have just index.css, index.js, and this register service worker that comes with Create React app that we don't need to touch. Okay, obviously we have failed to compile because, well, the hello import doesn't really work. We don't have anything. So let's start off with this. Let's start off by creating a card component. And this card component, we'll have to import it from card.js. Again, if I save this, still get an error because it doesn't exist. So let's create it. I'm going to say new file, card.js. Again, making sure that this is using Babel. And let's do what we've done before. We do import React from React. Instead of doing the class way for now, we're just going to worry about building the function. So I'm going to say const card equals, it won't have any properties for now. And this will return, have some brackets, and within here, we'll say that it has a div. Within this div, we'll have an image, and this image will have some sort of a source that we don't know what it is yet, so we'll just keep it the way it is. Closing tag, and we'll have another div that within here, if you remember, we have our name and email in here. So we'll just do an h2. We'll just write hard-coded values here. We'll do Jane Doe. And finally, a p tag that has some email address. So let's do janedoe@gmail.com. Close the tag. All right, so we just have a simple component that's returning card. And remember, we want to export this. So we want to say export default card. Save. I get img elements must have an alt property. Again, it's giving me a nice hint. So let's just add a alt property. We just say what this photo is. So I'll just say photo for now. Or I'll say robots for now. Compiled successfully. If we look back at our app, we have robots, Jane Doe, and Jane Doe. Perfect. All right, we have the card component, and you must be asking yourself, why are we using React here if we're not really using it? Let's see what happens if I remove it. I get, a whole bunch of errors that says React must be in scope when using JSX. Remember, JSX is this. We're not writing HTML, we're writing JSX. And we need to import React so that our program understands JSX, this HTML-like syntax. Okay, now we need an image. And for this exercise, I have something called RoboHash for you. It's a really, really cool API. And for those that don't know what APIs are, don't worry, I have a section coming up with all that information. Well, you'll get to learn about it. But the cool thing about RoboHash is I can just say anything in here, and it will return a random robot for me. All we need is just this URL, and I can just say for now, test. If I save this and go back to my example, there you go. We have our random robot. If I change this to, let's say, test, I save, well, now I get another robot. How cool is that? All right. I want to make sure that the size is somewhat small. So you can do a question mark here and just give it width and height. So I'm just going to do 200 by 200. And again, this is just something that you do with this URL that they give you in the information here. I won't make you go through it. I save. Everything should look nice. Now, let's say I wanted to add a title, and I'll do something like div or h1 robo friends here. You see I get an error here? It's because, remember, we need to return one thing. And we can't have multiple elements being returned, right? If we want to return something, make sure it's one thing or an array. But for now, we'll worry about the title later. We want to make sure that we're only returning one element. So in this case, the div element that has a ton of things inside, which is the card component. All right. Let's save. All right, we have our card component. It looks nice, but what if I wanted to have multiple cards now? According to what we know, because we have the card component, if I go to index.js, I can just say, I'm going to put this on a new line so you can see, I can just wrap this in a div, again, because we want to return just a single element, and I can say card, and close the div tag, save, and look at that. We have multiple cards now. They're each their own component. Okay, but let's add some styling to this just to make it look nicer. Again, because we have tachyons, we can use some really nice syntax. If we go to the cars component, within the div, I can say class name. Again, remember, we can't use class. BG light green, so that is background light green. And this is just tachyon classes that are already predefined for us. Again, CSS section, this isn't that. So we're not going to focus too much on CSS. I'll just give you the stylings that you need. We have the div, the border, we have padding of 3. We'll add some margins too as well, and then we'll do grow, which is the animation. So if I save this, look at that. That's pretty nice. You know what? Let's add a few more. We'll do BW2 and shadow 5 to add a bit of shadows to them. There you go. They look more 3D now. That looks very nice. There you go. We have our cards. Again, we don't want this static card where it says Jane Doe, Jane Doe, Jane Doe. We want it to be dynamic, right? So it sounds like we need what we call props, properties. Well, and I actually have for you a robots object that I've created. So I'm just going to add a new file here that says robots.js. And within here, I'm just going to copy and paste this. As you can see, it is just a constant object. It's robots. It's an array of objects, and it has ID, name, username, email. And these are just random that I've made. If you want this file, then you can grab the files from the end of this section. But for now, this way I have something that I can use, and you can see I'm exporting it. Well, I can say import robots from dot, because we're in the same directory, robots. Now, if I save this, I get robots is defined but never used. But because this is using export instead of export default, this file could have multiple exports. It just so happens that I only have one. The rule is, for these ones, because they were default, well, you can just do card. For ones that aren't default, you have to destructure it. That is like this. So that if I have another variable, let's say that says cats, then I will have to do cats to grab it. So we have robots. And now I can give it some properties. I can say ID equals, and again, we have these brackets so that it's a JavaScript expression, and we'll say robots first array dot ID has the ID. Then we have name equals robots, again, the first user dot name, close the bracket. And then we also have email equals robots first in the array dot email. Holy moly, that's a lot of typing. And I'm going to make this smaller just so you can see. I'm going to copy and paste for the other ones as well, except for change this to the second user and then the third user. Oh, the second user. Now, if I save this, it's compiled successfully, but well, nothing has changed because we need to go to cards. I'm going to close robots.js for now, and this, because cards needs to now accept parameters. And what are the parameters? Well, it's properties. And these props are now props dot name and props dot email. I save that, go back. It's not working. Well, because this is a JavaScript expression, right? So I need to wrap it in curly brackets, just the way it works in JSX. Save. Look at that. We have dynamic names that we're passing as properties to each one. Let's add text center here. And there you go. Now we have everything centered. That's a lot better. Okay, but we also passed ID. We can use ID to do something cool. If you remember in the ES6 section, we have template strings. And because this is a template string, we have to wrap it in a curly bracket, so it's a JavaScript expression. And now within the robohash, instead of using test here, we can randomize what robots we get by using this syntax, as you remember. And in here, we can just say props.id. So now this will say robohash.org ID of whatever it is for the robot with the size. So we make sure that, again, the IDs are always dynamic and changing. If I save this and go back, look at that. You see that there's a bit of a delay, again, because we're talking to the API and the API is returning answer for us. But how cool is that? We just created our own dynamic cards. One last thing. Although this works, something nicer that you can do is we have something called destructuring. We can do something like const name email equals props again, as you might remember from ES6. And now I can use, and let's add ID as well. And it still works. Another cool thing that you can do, and this is even cleaner, is within the parameters, you can do destructuring. So again, you can add these over here now. And now if I save, it should still work, and it does. This might be confusing if you're new to destructuring, but as you saw, step by step, we're just receiving props and we're destructuring the props right inside of the brackets here. This is much cleaner. Whew. All right, that was a lot of fun. In a really, really fast way, we've just created our own cards. In the next section, we're going to expand on this and make this even better. I'll see you in that one. Bye-bye.